Here we go again, back for another week of the On Blast Podcast, NFL Picks Edition. My name is Sheldon Alexander. I'm joined by my guy, Mr. Matt Russell. How you doing, my dude? How you feeling? Week 9. Does that sound weird to you?
It always feels a little bit weird, let's be honest. Speaking of weird, I was driving around today, and I just started thinking again about the Panthers-Falcons game on Sunday. Like, it doesn't usually take me like 3 days to just kind of like, honestly, unwind from that. And part of that was, I got sort of deeper into the Panthers later on in the week. We talked about it last week, how I'd grabbed a little +6 before the line moved to 4. And then I got in, we got it into some money line action. And having just sort of lived through that game, and imagine if that game was a Sunday night game or a Monday night game or a Thursday night game, right? Just like the absolute chaos of that game. It's so funny how games get buried in the 1 o'clock game. It's like, oh yeah, and by the way, like PJ Walker threw a ball 70 yards, which I didn't think which we didn't really know that he could do, and like hit DJ Moore, and then obviously the helmet thing or whatever. And I was thinking about like that helmet play or the call, and how like I should feel so much better about that game because that obviously allowed them to cover the spread after all kinds of craziness, even in the overtime. But like, I'm still annoyed that from a money line standpoint, like that didn't cash, like, which is so selfish and so ridiculous that I would be like picking nits with regards to the money line, considering they scored on a 65-yard pass with 12 seconds left. Like, what kind of psycho am I? Where like, I'm still kind of like just driving around the city, like thinking about how weird it, like compartmentalizing, like, you really should feel pretty good about the Carolina Panthers, covering that game, even if they didn't win the game, because I mean, who's using Eddie Pinheiro to kick field goals at this point in our lives anyway? But anyway, long story short, feeling good, but definitely feeling weird.
That's why the people come to this podcast, for the vibes from the Panthers Falcons, right? Because that game was electric. That was an insane game. Just from like the ending of that game, we would never seen anything like that before. Like that was in absolute insanity. And I remember someone in the room saying they're gonna miss a field goal, because someone in the room always says that, right? And it's like, shut up, nah, they can't miss a field goal. And then when you realize, oh, they went back pretty far.
Oh, for the extra point. Yeah. Well, we had like the field goal in overtime.
It's
and
so
the funny
insane.
thing is,
in overtime, it's like, yeah, you guys are chums for sure. Right?
But like, he has a kick that's shorter than what the extra point would have been in the overtime. So it was almost like DJ Moore gets less blame because Pinheiro ends up missing a super short kick anyway. So you kind of feel like, well, even if he kept his helmet on, like Pinheiro, might have still missed the kick. Like he had ample opportunity to make the kick the second time and still didn't do it. So in a way, like DJ Moore kind of got off the hook in a really weird way. I'm more mad at Eddie Pinheiro than I am at DJ Moore at this point.
Well, one of the main mantras of this pod, wherever we've been doing it over the last few years, is that kickers suck and kickers should be banned from all levels of football. But either way, kickers miss kicks. We make picks.
Oh, I like that.
Ooh, bars. But this is the On Blast Podcast. This is week 9 of our NFL picks. And for people who might be new to the proceedings here and what we do each and every week, I try to give where I'm leaning, what my pick is. And then Matt comes in with the information and education about where the line was, where it is, and where it could be going before kickoff. And, I'll say this is what I'm thinking, and I will get talked out of picks. And that happens a lot. Talked into picks, that also happens a lot. We hope to come out on the other end with a winning record. And so far, through 8 weeks, so good. So far, so good. I can't even say it. As I was even typing it out, I tweeted this. I was typing it out. I'm like, this doesn't really make sense. 12-3 last week. Woo! 73, 46-4 on the season. I had to stop and count that again because I was like, that doesn't really make sense. But here we are. We're just trying to keep the good times rolling. And the goal is just to win more than we lose, but have fun because we try to talk out the picks, right? This is where I'm leaning. How confident am I feeling about it? So stick around, enjoy. For the people that were watching this not live, what ends up happening is you can scroll ahead to the game of your choice. You're not really sure for which side to lean or what's going on here. You can go ahead, scroll through, see the times. Also, bless us with a like. bless us with the subscribe button, all that fun stuff.
And you can
how
still
you
listen on a
things.
Monday. You can still listen on a Monday. You can scroll ahead and find out that we like the Browns +3, +3.5.
That's what I'm saying.
Right?
That's what I'm saying. Hey, I tried to push people towards it. Like, we were still cooking into Sunday night and Monday night as well. Hey, winners all around. Keep the good times rolling. And we start off with another interesting theme as we start on Thursday night. When I say interesting theme, this is what I mean. Our double-digit spreads are always something very interesting. And right away, we got the Houston Texans.
I was going to say, you're already shook.
Yes, I'm already shook, and it's early. We got the Houston Texans as 14-point underdogs at home.
Mm-hmm.
At home.
Yeah.
At home. I'm saying it again.
It's a thing.
And for people who are new to the pod, okay, what I always try to do with these double-digit spreads is I'll come on and I'll say, I'm always leaning towards taking the points. And then I ask my friend Matt to talk me out of this just, overreaction to the rule, just take the points, double-digit spread, take the points. So I'm always going to lean there, and I ask my friend Matt to talk me out of it. So I'm going to start here and say, hey, Eagles, easy win last week. Texans lost by a TD to the Titans. I want to lean on the Texans because that's just my jam. I like leaning on the Texans a lot. That's what happens a lot here on this pod.
That's right.
The Eagles are rolling, my dude. I need you to talk me out of taking the points.
Okay, I can't do that.
Okay.
And here's why. So a couple of different reasons. Number one, you just mentioned the results from last week. Like, were those results really a surprise in either case, right? Like, yeah, okay, they lost to the Titans. Titans. Like, that's kind of exactly what they do a lot of the time, especially when Derrick Henry is just running over them, through them, around them, into their souls. And same thing with the Eagles. Like, yeah, you beat up on the Steelers. So, like, nothing crazy happened. Like, there weren't any injuries, anything like that. This line was 9 last week.
Ooh.
Right. So, and I don't recall like seeing it at 9 and being like, yep, need to jump on the Eagles like right this second before like this goes up 5 points. And part of that was because my numbers make this 10.
Okay.
So, you know what I mean? So like I'm in that spot where like, okay, my number's 10, the look ahead number is 9. So the only move in theory is to just like lay 9 points with a road favorite, which like objectively isn't something that I'm looking to do. And so I'm certainly not looking to do it now that kind of nothing has happened, right? From a rating standpoint, like guess what? Houston still stinks, right?
Yeah.
Like from a rating standpoint, like they're still in that high 20s, worst team in the league type zone, right? You can drop them down to the low 20s, but you're going to have to drop them down into the teens to get them into a 14-point home underdog situation. And the Eagles, by the way, like they're slowly ticking up from their rating standpoint, but you look at some of the other teams that are, certainly above them, right? The Bills, the Chiefs above them, and then even the teams in their neighborhood, right? Like the Bucs, the Rams, I'm kind of going through 49ers, right? Like what do all of these teams have in common? The Eagles don't have to play them. Right? Like, so we're just going to go this entire regular season without really, they're just going to play the junior varsity every week. And a lot of cases, they're going to blow them out here. And this like adjustment feels like the books just going like, listen, there's going to be no shortage of Eagles money. And they opened at 13 and a half. And guess what happens? A bunch of Eagles money comes in. Yeah. So like, sure enough, right? Like still got that Eagles money and they move it up to 14. I don't know where this is headed. Are we going to get to 14 and a half? Who knows here? So like, listen, it's not some huge bet. It's not something that like you have to do by any stretch of the imagination, but like certainly the value is with the Texans and like, are we going to beat them up for not winning a game, that was a 2-point spread? Obviously it's ugly in the way in which they did not win because they gave up 300 yards on the ground and you don't have to send a written invitation to the Eagles to just run the football. They are happy to do so. And I imagine they do so a ton. Yeah. But part of that thing is if they are running the football a ton, like this is going to be a low scoring game. This is going to be a game that, these possessions take a long time to sort of, execute, right? Even if it's the Eagles kind of gashing at 5-6 yards a clip. Now, listen, Miles Sanders and to a lesser extent, Jalen Hurts, like they could pop off a big run, or that could certainly open up a long pass for, 75-yard AJ Brown touchdown, right? Like certainly AJ Brown was getting in work against some crappy, like fourth string Steelers corner, right? And they had to make an adjustment. Finally, Mike Tomlin got around to making an adjustment at halftime to maybe not have that guy get roasted by AJ Brown on every possession. And so you go, okay, like as weird as it is to say, like Texans secondary and their pass defense is like okay, and if they they don't have this like massive hole with some like again fourth string cornerback there, then like it's not gonna be as easy in sort of a quick strike type offense for the Eagles. So basically what I'm saying here is like this could be a 20-point game in the second half, and we see the Eagles take their foot off the gas all the time. And like the Steelers could have, again, you get into a sort of rookie quarterback territory where things got a little weird there for Kenny Pickett, but like they could have in theory, maybe not covered the number, but got it to within, say, 2 touchdowns last week, which again is all we're asking from the Texans. So like last week, we were asking the Texans to win a game outright, which again is not a position that we should be asking the Texans to do against, no matter what the quarterback is. Yeah. But now we're just asking the Texans to really just not get embarrassed or like honestly play for 60 minutes. Because if they play for 60 minutes, like this game can be, 27-17. It can be a lot like that Sunday night game, right? Where the Packers just played for 60 minutes. Now, Davis Mills, I don't know that you're trusting him to get that late touchdown in the same way that you would Aaron Rodgers. And honestly, fundamentally looking back at that game, like there was 3 big underdogs last week, and it was Kenny Pickett and, and then Aaron Rodgers. And it's like, which one? And obviously Justin Fields, like which one of those 3 guys can you trust to like make a big throw to cover the game late, right? And it's not about like the Packers competing with the Bills. It's not about the Texans competing with the Eagles. It's about trusting a quarterback to get you that touchdown late. So listen, Davis Mills isn't exactly, he's not Kenny Pickett, but he's also not Aaron Rodgers. So like, this isn't some massive bet or whatever. Like, don't go crazy on this, but like, listen, it's Thursday night. You're going to want to play a side one way or another. 14 is, as weird as it sounds, a pretty key number. Like, just take the Texans plus 14. Maybe it goes to 14.5 if you can wait that out.
I think it will. People who are going to jump on wanting to bet on this game are just going to bet on the Eagles. You can probably get it at 14.5 and even better. Cool.
Yeah.
Right, for the Houston Texans. I'm with you
maybe,
there.
Yeah, maybe cool. It might be a horror show, but yeah.
For sure. But this is a difference of what we're talking about here, right? It's about what sides would you rather be on, right? And that's kind of the difference here in what we're trying to do. Let's keep things moving. Sure. We got the Chargers as 3-point favorites in Atlanta. Chargers coming off a bye, but I still don't even like them as 3-point road favorites in Atlanta. I don't know about that one. Atlanta won a wild one that, as we've discussed earlier, versus the Panthers. I'm leaning Falcons here. I'd love an extra half point, but my overall question here, I'm on Atlanta. I like Atlanta at home. They can move the ball. They're spicy. They can do stuff. They're not just a trash team.
Yeah.
My question to you, though, what kind of team is the Chargers? Because I have no idea at this point.
This Chargers team is like, the problem is this is the type of game the Chargers win to make you think that they can compete with the senior varsity, right? If Carolina and Atlanta was just a JV type of game, this is the type of game that the Chargers can win. It appears, obviously, after bye week last week, and he made a cameo appearance 2 weeks ago, it seems like the Chargers are going to get Keenan Allen back. Okay. And if we saw anything from PJ Walker last week, it's like, just give me one like sensible wide receiver and you can do work on this Falcons defense, right? They don't get a ton of pressure. The secondary is banged up. Obviously, AJ Terrell, if he's back, like that makes a big difference. They had 4 different guys out, I think it was last week. And yet, like, you're going to make PJ Walker look good. You're going to make Joe Burrow look incredible the week before that. And like now Justin Herbert off a bye is going to kind of walk in here and like, the Chargers have the issues that they have, but like, think about the issues that they have, right? Issue number 1, obviously, Rashawn Slater being out for the season. Pass rushes can get to Herbert, excuse me. Not the Falcons, right? Like that's replacement level defensive line play. So like you're that's going to be a problem against really good defensive ends and outside linebackers. It's not going to be that much of a problem against the Falcons. Defensively, getting pressure on the Falcons. Well, you don't really need to get pressure on the Falcons because they don't really throw the football, right? You just need to contain Marcus Mariota and play good run defense. Now, obviously, it's the Chargers we're talking about here. So good run defense, not in their repertoire. No. But if you're kind of combining, bad run defense against a good rushing team, going up against good pass offense and a bad pass defense team, it's 2022. Right? Like I rather the passing advantage than the running advantage. If the other team doesn't have a passing advantage because, it's PJ Walker or some of these other teams that the Falcons have beat, then it's not that much of an issue. And so, whether it's Keenan Allen or some of these other sort of, quasi replacement level Chargers receivers, like that's not really any different than Carolina. And Carolina should have won that game last week and they should have done so relatively comfortably, but like they kind of let it slip, right? That's the kind of thing that Carolina might do from time to time because, again, we're talking about the JV teams here. So if the Chargers play like just good, solid defense, keeping Mariota in the pocket, like they don't need to sack him because, again, he's not going to be throwing the ball that much. And if they can get an early lead because their pass offense, which, again, should have success, makes Mariota have to turn into a thrower more than a handoffer, right?
And that's not where they want to be.
That's not where they want to be. Exactly. They end up being in this place that they were in 2 weeks ago against Cincinnati. And you go, well, they're at home, but like Chargers on the road is fine, right? Chargers play on the road all the time, right? They play in a dome where half the fans are against them anyway, or honestly more than half the fans are against them anyway. So like Chargers on the road is always kind of like a pretty good spot. Chargers against a team that can't defend the pass is always a pretty good spot. So like this is one where you're going to kind of look up and you'll be like, oh man, by the way, the Falcons actually haven't covered in the last 2 weeks after getting all that kind of credit for covering without actually winning a ton of games, right? Like they're down 21-0 to the Bucs. That's what sort of led us to the Bengals 2 weeks ago being able to, throw the ball a ton against them. So like we're back here again. And again, you never know what happens after these bye weeks, right? With regards to self-scouting for these NFL teams. I would like to think that the Chargers, after a year and a half of Joe Lombardi as offensive coordinator, like somebody will have said to him, like, bro, we have to just throw the football. Like running Austin Eckler directly into the line 15 times a game is an abject waste of our time. Yeah. Just throw the football. Like, look at what, Burrow is doing. Look at what PJ bleeping Walker is doing against this team. Like, just let him throw. So honestly, I think that's a possibility here, and I like the Chargers to win this game relatively comfortably.
So I'm just going to add this breaking news as I was looking this up as we are recording this pod Wednesday afternoon. Keenan Allen says that he suffered a setback during the bye week.
Oh, of course he did.
Of course he did. I'm just throwing that out there. That is like literally as we're recording this pod on Wednesday, this is what has just come down the pipeline. Adding to a very frustrating season for Keenan Allen fantasy owners. But more importantly, of course, Brandon Staley, whose offense is struggling without Keenan Allen as well. Tough times for sure for the Chargers, and they need a bounce back. And you're right. The Falcons, I think, are a prime team for said bounce back. It'll be very interesting to see how that game plays out for sure. As that's one of the teams that people are looking at as being one of the top teams in the league. Two teams or a team at home that will not be one of the top teams in the league are the Bears. The Bears are playing host to the Dolphins, who are riding high. Dolphins are riding so high, despite the fact they were laying over a field goal last week, barely covered that, and now they're laying even more on the road. Back-to-back weeks of the Dolphins laying points on the road. I don't know how you feel about that, but it's the Bears. The Bears got smacked by the Cowboys. Am I crazy liking the home dogs? Like, you almost talked me into like switching up the Falcons, but there's a theme you're gonna sense here where I'm on a lot of home dogs. Am I crazy for liking the Bears here as home dogs at +5?
No, it would be a little bit nicer if they hadn't traded away their 2 best defensive players over the last couple
That's part of my question, because I'm in a deep fantasy league where I got Roquan Smith, so I know how big of a deal he is to their defense for
tackling machine.
Yes.
And it looks like the weather's going to be bad Saturday in Chicago, but not Sunday, because we like to back the Bears when the weather is grim, right?
Yes,
as much as the Dolphin likes the water. I imagine that offense probably not going to be as explosive necessarily if it was windy and or rainy. So I don't love this like as much necessarily, but like I was impressed. It depends on how you look at it, right? We were on the Cowboys last week. Was I impressed with the Bears offense, or was I infuriated by the Cowboys defense, sort of just consistently allowing the Bears to like move the ball down the field? But like that just might be where the Bears offense is.
Yeah.
Like consistently moving the ball, down the field. There's obviously not going to be a ton of explosive plays necessarily. They have both those running backs who can go. I'm a Khalil Herbert guy. I don't know why he doesn't get more of the carries. I think he got more of the carries finally last week. Who knows what the distribution
I'm right there with you. There with you.
And they're running these plays for Justin Fields like via his legs. Again, though, the defense is just it's just going to be up against it here with this again, especially if it's a sort of a nice weather type situation. I'll be on Chicago with you. I'm going to wait and see if we can get to 6, because again, worth mentioning last week, what was our big takeaway from Dolphins to Lions was wait on this line. Like it is going to go up. And so it goes and it hits 4. There was even some 4.5s out there. And of course it ends up landing 4, because in these games, these back and forth type of games, I think we're going to get another one in Detroit this week. Like somebody's going to kick a field goal somewhere along the way, and then the game is just going to go 3-4, 3-4, 3-4 back and forth.
Yep.
Right. Like that, this isn't basketball where it goes 2s, back and forth. This isn't hockey where it goes 1s back and forth. It goes 3 and 4, unless the game's tied, in which obviously it goes 3s and 7s. But like it is go back and forth, 3 and 4, 3 and 4 all the time. So if you're gonna try to get 4, right, as a key number here. So in this case, I want to get 6, because just in case this ends up going to overtime or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So, if you followed the advice last week, you didn't lose with the Lions. You pushed because 4 was widely available. And when we say wait and see, like that's what we mean, because the difference between a loss and a push is obviously something in your bank account, right? Or something
Correct.
in your betting accounts. So this is the same sort of deal. Like if it goes to 4.5, okay, like it's probably not going to land 5, of course, because I say that it probably will. But like, what I mean? You're not going to lose that much with 5. But like, if people get really psyched up about Bradley Chubb, if they get never mind about Bradley Chubb, shaking his head, then this line might go up to 6, right? Like the money might come in here on Miami, especially if the weather stays where it is, and people think like, okay, Miami's going to be just fine. Like I wouldn't mow the lawn, at Soldier Field. I would hose it down if it's not going to rain. Like you have to slow Miami down here somehow. The defense isn't going to. But honestly, I'm not that thrilled with the Dolphins defense either. It's why we thought the Lions were going to be able to kind of come back and put up like a 30-point game, which we hadn't seen for a few weeks from the Lions. So now I'm looking at the Bears going like, oh my God, I kind of think the Bears are capable of putting up a pretty big number. They're also pretty capable of giving one up. So maybe the over ends up being the play here if it's nice weather and both teams can score. But yeah, I'm going to take some patience here and wait to see if we get a better number on the Bears.
I like it. The Bears at +5 is Sheldon says this week. Panthers at Bengals. The Bengals are 7-point home favorites, and this just feels like way too many points to me. I mean, I know it's the Panthers, so it's not even so much that I'm placing that much stock into what the Panthers do, but your man's PJ Walker seems like he can do stuff. And so I'm looking at the Bengals, and we saw what their offense looks like without Jamar Chase. And it's, surprise, surprise, Jamar Chase is pretty important. Yeah. I don't know. The Bengals are favored by 7 seems weird to me, but one thing that you always like to tell me is like Vegas isn't out here just handing out numbers, right? They're not just handing out money. So I need you to tell me like, what am I missing here? Why are the Bengals favored by a touchdown?
Okay, so let's have the conversation about the Bengals, right? What do you do with them after that performance, knowing that Jamar Chase is not walking through that door anytime soon, right? Because we got really excited about the Bengals when they beat up on the Falcons, right? I don't mean you and I specifically, right? Because we were not on the Bengals. I mean the market, right? And so we got up. We've talked about how, like, literally since before they made it to the Super Bowl, we've had them in kind of the high 50s from a rating standpoint, and like kudos to them for pulling off those upsets and getting to the Super Bowl and almost darn near winning, blah, blah, blah. But we're not going to overrate them just because of like a couple of on-field results. And I know that sort of sounds, antithetical to people, but like, whatever, sorry, that's how this works. And so when they get bumped up over 60 here, which is what was needed to get them into a point spread of, around 3 to 3.5, call it 3.3, like, we knew that it was like, okay, like they might be all of a sudden a low 60s team, but like it doesn't feel like that's correct with Jamar Chase out. So we got to knock them back here a little bit.
Yeah.
So sort of just put that in your back pocket. Meanwhile, you got Carolina, right? Who, 2 weeks ago are 13-point home underdogs. I mean, that sounds a little familiar, right? To this weekend, this Thursday's matchup. And like, what does that mean? Well, it means everybody was out on the PJ Walker experience, and we knocked them down to a 20 out of 100, essentially, in the rating, right? And they go and win that game outright. And part of that is Tampa Bay is not as good as their rating, but part of that is also, you know what? Carolina is actually pretty decent, right? And like, we talked about it before the Rams game. And again, like, I believe they had the lead at halftime. If not, we're tied at halftime of that Rams game. So really, they've only played one bad half of the sort of 3 games or 6 halves that PJ Walker has been under control. But like we talked about it, like, why removing Baker Mayfield, who was literally the worst quarterback in the NFL statistically up until that point? Like, why was that supposed to be a bad thing? Yeah. Why firing Matt Rule, who'd like won 5 games in his life? Like, why was that supposed to be a bad thing? Now, obviously, they go and they trade Christian McCaffrey, and that felt like the last straw. But kudos to this team for like keep on keeping on here, right? Like, they're trying. And so, like, okay, we moved them up there to now like in the low 30s for last week's game. Obviously, still like over a field goal underdog to the Falcons. And so those two numbers, with the Bengals being in the low 60s and the Panthers being in the low 30s, like, that's going to create a pretty big point spread. In fact, it creates 10 here, essentially. Okay, that's like kind of actually 10.5 officially. Okay. And like the look ahead line was around 9 last week, right? Again, this is before these 2 games played out. So you go, okay, like we probably would have been on the Bengals in theory. But again, in theory, Jamar Chase, didn't matter, on that rating. So like, we're going to knock the Bengals down because there's one thing is the market ratings based on the closing lines here, but there's another thing like, okay, what is the Bengals actual rating here? So like, again, I got to move them down a lot closer to mediocrity, right? We talk about like team, like average team being 50. Like, this has to get pretty close to like the low 50s for the Bengals, because honestly, it wasn't very pretty. Meanwhile, they lose, they were without a corner, Eli Apple, who, listen, various degrees on whether he's actually good or whatever, but he's still a starting quarterback in the NFL, or at least on their depth chart. And then they lose Chidobe Awuzie, who's a pretty big, significant addition to them from the Cowboys. And so there's your starting cornerbacks right there. And like, that's kind of a big position. We have seen what happens when even one cornerback is sort of a lesser than, right? We just talked about with regards to the Steelers, right? You have that hole, offensive tackle and cornerback. You cannot survive if you don't have a dude in those positions, right? So we go, okay, like Cincinnati has to come down. Meanwhile, like, I'm sorry, PJ Walker, totally serviceable. Not going nuts here, but like, aren't the Panthers about as good as the Jets at this point? Aren't the Panthers about as good as the Bears at this point? Honestly, they're about as good as the Falcons. Like, you can't have a closer game last week than that matchup. And so that's what brings the number down here, right? As these two teams sort of tighten. And now you've got it at sort of a 7. I have a 7.5 with, say, the Panthers 34 out of 100 and the Bengals 54 out of 100. It's a very real possibility that the Bengals are worse than that. And there's a very real possibility that the Panthers are better than that. And I think that's why you've seen this number come down from 8, where it was on open, to 7.5. And honestly, didn't spend a ton of time at 7.5. And now it's more widely available at 7. Now you can get 7.5 here. You just have to pay a little bit more. And that's the conversation that is worth having here. What do you pay to get off of 7 to have plus 7.5 in your account. There is a minus 119 available out there right now on Carolina at plus 7.5. That is kind of the ceiling. Go grab that if you can. Minus 120. That's when we start getting a little out of control as far as the value is concerned. But honestly, the Panthers are fully live to win this game. I didn't like what I saw from Cincinnati. Like the play calling. By the way, when I guess because he made it to the Super Bowl, Zach Taylor's all of a sudden a good coach. He's been an issue for 2 years now, right? The offensive play calling has been an issue for
this whole season.
Yeah. And so when you don't have a next level talent like Jamar Chase, who has that bond, that sort of unspoken thing with Joe Burrow, the offensive line still isn't great. They have pieced it together. They are not running the football. They weren't running the football before Monday. They didn't run the football during Monday night's game. Yeah, man. I think Carolina plus 7, but again, you can get plus 7.5 for a decent price still out there. And they're going to be prominently involved in the round robin underdog money line parlay this week.
Woo! Okay, PJ Walker train is here. It's arriving. We are on board, and I like it. This game is weird because it's two teams that I don't know how I feel about betting on them the entire season. And that, of course, is the Packers and the Lions. Love-hate relationship with betting on both of these teams this entire year. Got the Packers as 3.5-point road favorites in Detroit. This normally would be a classic spot where I'm here to say that extra half point, especially, give me the Lions, scrappy Lions. That's what I want to do. Now, the Lions have been struggling, but I have to remove that from my brain here for a sec. And I told you the theme has been me and the home dogs. So I guess I'm asking you to talk me out of this because the extra half point is the reason I'm on the Lions here.
Okay, let's play a fun game. Let's play everybody's favorite game. Make Sheldon guess a point spread. Alternative universe. Suddenly Aaron Rodgers and the Packers turn it around. Or I shouldn't say that because that implies that they're playing really well. Let's say for some reason, no, you know what? Let's do the whole they go to London thing. Let's say that's, or what is it, Germany next week? Let's say they go to Europe, right? And the Packers play the Dolphins, okay, on a neutral field. Who's favored by how much?
Packers.
This version of the Packers, this version of the Dolphins.
I'd say Dolphins are favored by less than a field goal.
So let's say 2.5, right?
Let's do it.
Okay. Why is this the same spread as Dolphins at Lions last week?
Interesting.
Right? The Dolphins were just minus 3.5 last Wednesday.
Correct.
And now the Packers are minus 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
On what planet are the Dolphins and the Packers an equal team? How does that get slotted in? And
there's no Tyreek Hill on the Packers.
Right. Imagine if there was Aaron Rodgers. I was going to say Aaron Rodgers would be a lot happier, but I don't know if that's even the case. And it's not like the Dolphins, by the way, won the game by a touchdown or 10 points or whatever. And it was just we undervalued the Dolphins. The game landed on the number, right? Once it got to 4. So even if you say, okay, well, it closed 4, so there's a half-point difference. Who on earth is betting the Packers if the Dolphins and the Packers play on a neutral field tomorrow?
That's true.
Right? This line has to be short. If the Dolphins-Lions line was correct, which again, I think we can safely say that was a pretty solid line last week, this has to be under a field goal or at the very least a field goal. And it was. It opened 3.5. I bet it right away, Detroit plus 3.5, because I thought that was going to go away. It did, and then something happened somewhere along the way here, and who knows, again, this is Wednesday afternoon, we might get, injury reports, blah, blah, blah. But, somehow it's back up to 3.5?
Yeah.
What? Okay, craziness. Maybe, right? Maybe the Packers, win this game, cover this game, all of that sort of thing. Listen, the Lions just don't win football games. It's same old Lions in that department. But how is this line the same? Doesn't make any sense. So yeah, on principle, you have to take the Lions and hope for the best. Now, maybe that the idea is, well, DeAndre Swift, he's banged up, that he might not go and all of that sort of thing. I'm sorry, he can't move the point. He's not a point spread moving player, right?
Yeah.
People will be surprised with what and who moves a point spread on a given week. It is way less. There are way fewer players than you think are going to move a point spread on a given week. DeAndre Swift is not one of them. Very few players in this game. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is one of them. Jared Goff is one of them. Obviously, quarterbacks are always kind of one of them. as sort of weird as that is to say, when it comes to Jared Goff, like mattering in any way, shape, or form. But he's played really well, so I can't, you know what I mean? We can't.
No, I gotcha.
We can't beat him up too much here. So yeah, man, I think this just has to be Lions. It's probably gross, but honestly, like just because they haven't won a game or won one game or whatever, just because they don't care for winning games doesn't mean that they can't win this game.
I like it. We are moving on to the Colts at the Patriots and talking about teams laying points. Got the New England Patriots laying 5.5 points at home. Seems like a lot of points, but I'm reminded a lot of what Bill Belichick does to young QBs. Your man's Sam Ellinger.
That's right.
Here's the thing. Read this morning as I was prepping for said podcast. You know, there's a little bit of reading I do. Little bit, not a lot though. This from Stephen Holder of ESPN. First thing this morning, Colts QB Sam Ellinger sat down with former Patriot Stephon Gilmore to discuss the details of the New England Patriots defense and Bill Belichick's tactics. Ellinger is preparing for his second start, but young QBs have historically struggled against the Pats. Is that going to sway me from taking the Patriots and laying the 5.5 points? No, I am still on the New England Patriots, but should I be on the New England Patriots? That is a question that I ask you, my friend.
So we've talked about a few games here so far that I bet the line hasn't necessarily moved. Obviously, Detroit being one of them. I don't know if there was actually any other one that we've hit on yet, which means that this just brings us to the part of the program here, which is like not all that fun for the listener. And it's called Games I've Already Bet, where lines are no longer exist. But like if at least it should tell you something here, right? So this game opens Patriots plus 6.5. Now in theory, Patriots minus 6.5. Thank you. In theory, you go, okay, well, if I like the Colts, I should probably wait to see if this goes to 7. Sam Ellinger, Jonathan Taylor's injured, like blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, Matt, screw it, man. Just take the 6.5 now. And I took the 6.5 with the Colts here because honestly, I think Mac Jones might stink.
I can't
kind of should have lost to the Jets. And like, if outside of a roughing for the, the passer penalty, which isn't about the referees, because I think that was a roughing the passer, it's more about the player, putting himself in a position to rough the passer. Franklin Myers, I believe it was, for the Jets. Like that game should be 17-3, I believe it would have been, right? Because they were going the other way for the touchdown. And like, I don't know that the Patriots are coming back from 2 touchdowns down, even if like Zach Wilson was literally throwing them the ball at like every opportunity, right?
You need to see the ghosts again.
At 17-3, you have to. The ghost of Sam Darnold might come back. I'm pretty sure Sam Darnold's still alive. Shout out to Sam.
Somewhere.
Or Carolina, you can't get on the field because PJ Walker's too amazing, apparently.
The NFL is crazy.
So the point is, like, we almost had a back-to-back, like, loss to the Bears, loss to the Jets situation here for the Patriots, but because they don't, right, like they get this credit against the quote-unquote young quarterback. Now the interesting thing here, and I would love to kind of know specifically what sort of the deal was with this, but the Colts fired the offensive coordinator this past week, right? Which, like, okay, the next guy up here is Frank Reich, and whether that's this week or who do they play next week? I'm doing a quick skim. Oh, they're in Vegas. So like, listen, they're probably going to lose that game next week. Like he might be done by like week 10 here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Jim Irsay, not exactly like the most calm and collected customer, unless he's bringing a suitcase somewhere. Anyway,
just going to let that one go.
Yeah. Just let that one. Listen, man, these are facts, as you say, these are facts. So yeah, I grabbed that 6.5. Like now it's down to 5.5. And the reason I grabbed that 6.5 because I was like, that number is just too high. Market number expectation of the point spread, right? Based on previous point spread was 5.5. Okay. Again, this is a team that was a 3-point home favorite. And again, this is the sort of razor thin line that you and I talk about for, been talking about for 3 years about like how this is basically just a roulette game played out over the course of, 3 hours here. Like the Colts went from covering as like a 3-point favorite in a football game last week to losing outright on essentially one Terry McLaurin, like pretty sick play over your boy, Stephon Gilmore. So like we could be talking about, Sam Ehlinger like leading the team to a victory here and a cover, right? But we're not, because like Taylor Heineke throws the ball up in the air and like Terry McLaurin grabs it.
Yeah.
So like you can't tell me that the Colts can't win this game. My numbers, because again, like we use the market ratings that had the Patriots as 3-point. Honestly, it's the kind of the flip side. The Patriots are 3-point road favorites last week, and they're a roughing the passer penalty away from not winning that game. But instead, they end up covering that, right?
Yeah.
So like literally one play on either side, and we flip to Colts all of a sudden having won that game, and the Patriots were ringing, everybody's hand ringing because the Patriots have lost to another kind of crap team.
Yeah.
But those two things didn't happen. And they open at 6.5, which again, already too high, and on this sort of like mystique of Bill Belichick. And so it gets bet down to 5.5. But re-rating these teams, going like, honestly, kind of thought Ehlinger was playing pretty okay. If I had to sort of cook up a narrative, he didn't run the football that much last week. And like, I would sit here and say, like, that's a fireable offense. Like, Sam Ehlinger should be running the football. And maybe Jim Irsay and or Frank Reich was like, you know what, Matt? You're right. That is a fireable offense. So we're going to fire the guy. Right? Like, so like, maybe they fired him because Sam Ehlinger didn't run the football. And like, by the way, we just saw 2 weeks ago the Bears deciding to run the football with their quarterback. And like, that worked out pretty well against the Patriots. So like, I think we could get that like sort of surprise, Sam Ehlinger's running the football around here. And my numbers, by the way, I'm seeing what you're doing and I like it. I have the Patriots as like a 3-point favorite in this game. Because honestly, I don't know that there's that much of a difference. I think there's probably a 1-point difference between the Patriots with this Mac Jones version and the Colts with this Sam Ehlinger version. I don't know his whole history in that department. Obviously, okay, Jonathan Taylor, if he can't go, right, like he's setting out of practice because he like re-injured the ankle. You saw him getting it taped up last week and all of that sort of thing. Like, yes, that's a problem. So, okay, you can bump that thing up to 4 if you want. I'm certainly not like dying to pile in here at plus 5.5. I'm just going to sit here with my 6.5, maybe a little 6, and be kind of okay with it. But honestly, I think the Colts could win this game. Again, whether it's Jonathan Taylor or just sort of the combination of like the various running backs. Hell, Zach Moss might get some carries in this game, newly traded from the Buffalo Bills. And like, I think they could do some surprise stuff here with Sam Ehlinger. Again, I don't think did all that badly against Washington. I certainly thought he was going to be a lot worse, especially against the Washington front four. I think the Colts have a chance to win this game because honestly, like it's looked pretty rough here for the Patriots over these last couple of weeks.
Okay. The pick has been switched. Those watching the pod, which you should as well, even if you listen to the pod, you could do us a favor and click on the YouTube link and bless us with the like and then go about your day.
Yeah.
It costs you nothing. But the people watching know that the card has been out. The pick has been switched to the Indianapolis Colts at plus 5.5.
Cordless mouse has spoken.
We will see how things go there, as well as things go with their other AFC East counterparts, namely the Buffalo Bills, who are 12.5-point favorites at the New York Jets. 12.5 points. That sounds to me, once again, like a double-digit spread. And normally, I would be asking you to talk me into taking the points. But when we're talking about the Buffalo Bills, who just rolled over teams, you don't have to talk me into this because I am on the Buffalo Bills and would be on the Buffalo Bills against the Jets at any number below 2 touchdowns. It's just where I'm at. It's just how I'm feeling. What say you?
So it's funny, like when it comes to these big favorites that I can't make a case for, the underdog, and I'm like, and I bet. So I just kind of go, you know what? Take my money. Sportsbook, take my money. Like that's kind of, but it's like fine, right? Yeah. Like I'll dare the Jets to cover this number and force the sportsbook to keep my money. But like I'm just like, take it. Like I know I'm probably the fool for laying 12.5 points, but like what about the Jets? And again, you never know with the Jets. Like all of a sudden they just have a really good offensive game here or there. I don't see that happening against this Bills team. Like is it okay?
This Bill team's a problem, man. On
They're
offense,
a
it's tough to stop.
massive problem. Yeah, they're a massive problem on both sides of the ball. So the market number for this game is 11.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is that I feel like the market has overrated the Jets, right? And we talk about like recent point spreads. I think the market's overrated the Jets. So, okay, I already kind of know that my number on the Jets is going to be different, right? Like I kind of have them penciled into the low 40s, high 30s when it comes to the market number, right? This was a team that was favored on the road against Denver. I realize it was Brett Rippon, but still. And so I go, okay, like I'm not going to be as high on the Jets as what the market has indicated because people have been willing to bet the Jets the last couple of weeks. So now that the people aren't willing necessarily, like they're not tripping over themselves to bet the Jets here, like they're coming back closer to my number, right? And my number makes this 12.5, which is the point spread. So I jumped on some 11.5 as the Bills were hammering away on the Packers last week. But again, like I don't have the same fear of the whole backdoor, like, passing game touchdown type situation with Zach Wilson. Like, again, we've talked about it for weeks now. I'm sorry, is not good, right? Like, it's just, is there a way in which he becomes good? I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's, I just don't think he's built that way. I just don't think he thinks that way. I just don't think he's capable in that way. And so my actual fear here is Zach Wilson gets hurt and Joe Flacco comes in and starts doing Joe Flacco. I'm throwing the ball in every down. Remember the start of this year when Joe Flacco was literally the starting quarterback and literally firing away 50 attempts a game? Like he was leading the league in completions because they were throwing it on every down. Like I'm scared of that in the fourth quarter. Right now, they have sort of given this and the reason I've bet the Bills here is because they've given Wilson this like vote of confidence, if you will, saying like, yes, he's going to be our quarterback for the rest of the season, which obviously makes all the sense in the world. But like, man, it feels like any time you watch the Bills play, they are knocking dudes out, like quite literally, right? Like guys are just getting up from the ground and like checking out of the game because like, man, they hit hard and all of that sort of thing. Like, I can see Zach Wilson maybe not surviving this game and us getting backdoored here by Joe Flacco and going like, didn't see that coming. So maybe I'm putting that out in the ether right now so that at least we can say, totally saw that coming when that type of thing happens. But honestly, just take my money, like give me the Bills. Again, I have minus 11.5, 12, not really a key number here. So I wouldn't worry too much about the 12.5, but you can't bet the Jets here, I don't think.
I got you. Speaking of take my money, because I really don't know which side to lean on these two teams. Because has there been a quieter 6-1 team ever than the Minnesota Vikings? Right. They're laying 3.5 points on the road against the Washington Commanders. I'm reluctantly leaning on Minnesota. I just think they are in a different, and I'm just voicing this in a different way than you would. They're a different weight class than what the Commanders are. There's levels to it. I think the Vikings can put points up on the board. Heineke can be scrappy, but I don't know if it's to the same level here. I don't like taking Minnesota laying 3.5 points on the road, but yet here we are.
Yeah.
What do you say, my dude?
Same story with the Razor's Edge, right? With regards to the Colts and the Commanders last week, right? Like there's a world in which the Colts win that game comfortably by 2 scores. And I'm watching that game. Again, we were deep into the weeds with the Commanders as far as, on the point spread and whatnot. And so I'm just sitting there going like, never again with Taylor Heineke. Just like I saw it against Green Bay and like he was a turnover waiting to happen on every single play. And like it didn't really change in like the theoretically cozy confines of indoor, non-rain, non-sloppy type conditions, all of that sort of thing. And listen, again, we talked about it last week and I still don't listen. I don't think that maybe the Vikings deserve to win that game last week, but we're talking about muffed punts causing teams not to cover. And again, people always do the thing where it's like, oh, I only suffer bad beats against me. I never, get them in my favor. I somewhat agree with that because if you're doing this correctly, then you're going to be in good position late. And so by definition, you're only going to kind of get screwed, then sort of get a lucky cover. I have this streak going right now with muffed punts and special teams fumbles against me, as in like teams that I have bet on are just muffin punts hand over fist. And it's weird because it's this like tiny little thing. And honestly, I kind of feel like roughing the passer is a little bit like the opposite, where I feel like I'm getting roughing the passer calls going my way a little bit more. So I can kind of admit that. But like, I think that's like a 55, 60% type thing. Just anecdotally, I'm at like 98% on like getting muffed. Just right in the face with these punts.
Just gonna let that one go. And
it's Vikings, college, and it's college kids too. It's college kids and pros that are just muffing me right in the face here with these punts, and it's driving me nuts. So anyway, so I'm watching these games, and it's just like it happens again with Arizona against Minnesota. And so yeah, it's a little shaky here, like backing the Vikings, but I still think they're a pretty good team, right? Like I can acknowledge the fact that they didn't really deserve the cover there. That probably should have been a 2-point victory kind of at best. And I just don't want anything to do with Taylor Heineke. Like, this guy's driving me nuts. And like, yeah, we got away with one because Terry McLaurin like hauled it in last week. I think there's going to be love for this Commanders team. We've talked about it, man. Like, there's no home field advantage really for this Commanders team. It's just kind of like, are you going to get a break, right? Are you going to get that fumble return for a touchdown? Are you going to get that fumble return for a touchdown by the Packers, for example, called back? It's the team that lost by margin to the Tennessee Titans, right? Like we talk about, the Titans being a team that wins in the cracks, wins in the dark places. That might be Minnesota at this point. Right? Like, it's certainly not a dominant offense. It's certainly not a dominant defense. But like, I think they're going to be taking advantage of these like Taylor Heineke dying to turn the ball over type things, right? Like, he is getting away with it here. I think it's going to turn, turn into a pumpkin? That's the reference from Cinderella? Sure. I certainly wouldn't reference Taylor Heineke as Cinderella here, but like, God, man, like I just don't want to be. I'm off the Taylor Heineke thing. I just can't take it anymore. I think there's going to be a possibility where we can get the Vikings -3. This is a wait and see approach type situation. -3, -120 or better is the target price for the Vikings. That's the play I would make there.
Speaking of QBs or just teams you want to be off of, I definitely want to be off of the Raiders, but yet here I am. Raiders at the Jags. Raiders are 1.5 favorites. I really feel like the Jags are probably the better team. Like, I don't even know what that means per se, but what I'm saying is this has to be a last stand here for the Raiders. Like, what are we doing here? The Raiders can't go into the hostile environment that is Jacksonville and cover less than a field goal or just win the game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What are we even doing here after being shut out? Like, the embarrassment of being shut out by the Saints. You got to be able to come back the next week and bounce back and beat the Jags. I don't feel like that's asking too much, but from the look on your face, I can tell that you might disagree, and that's okay. This is why we're here.
No, it's actually the opposite. I completely agree with you, but it's like, it's less sort of raw, and it's more just like a couple of different things. Like, one, there's like a pretty decent trend, if you will, that if you get shut out one week, like you should be immediately bet on the next week, right? Like, because of sort of what you said there, right? Like, rally the troops, blah, blah, blah. We've had one shutout this season. A little trivia, Shell. Let's see if you can remember from this season, who got shut out this year? Who got shut out?
Wow.
That's a toughie. People are literally yelling into their podcast headphones or their
I don't
phone
know.
headphones.
The Panthers? No. I feel like it has to be a crap team. So I would have went with like the Bears or something like that, but no, I don't remember.
Here's a hint. It was in the same location as this game is being played.
Oh, the Jags shut someone out? That's a thing?
The Colts were shut out to the Jags, you'll recall. Remember that good time in everybody's lives?
I have that game. It's still on my PVR. I haven't watched it yet, but it's still there on my PVR, just
glowing, just dying to check out Matt Ryan.
Reminder.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Just, misguided throws and ill-advised pressures from Matt Ryan. The highlight tape of basically.
I'm sorry that I forgot that game. My apologies.
Fair enough. I mean, many have. The bigger point is, do you remember who the Colts played the next week? It was week 2. So
the Colts won. The Colts won. They beat someone good, the Chiefs.
There you go. He's back. All right. Yeah. The Colts beat the Chiefs the next week, and it was by far like the weirdest game of the season, but like it happened. Admittedly, small sample size. Like I get it. That's a 1-game sample size. The Raiders are so part of the reason that I sort of felt like the Raiders, and who knows if this actually came true or not. And listen, we never know any of this stuff actually sort of plays out in the truest sense of the way that we think it might. But like the flu was kind of going through the Raiders last week, right? Devontae Adams, like it's not a coincidence that Devontae Adams missed like 3 days last week with flu-like symptoms. And like, yeah, he came back to practice on Thursday or Friday. Then they flew to New Orleans, and it's not a coincidence that he had 3 yards, right? One catch, I think it was 3 yards. Like we think that's just a thing that's going to happen on a regular basis to Devontae Adams. Like I don't think so, right? And do you think he was the only one who was maybe a little bit under the weather? Like I'm just not ready to buy that. I think they're doing the right thing here where they're staying on the road. They're actually, I think it's Boca Raton or some sort of Florida location for the week, right? We talked about the 49ers, your 49ers doing that when they keep going to the Greenbrier in West Virginia when they go east for a couple, for back-to-back road games. Same sort of deal, right? Where it's New Orleans, obviously close to Jacksonville. New Orleans literally had a fake home game last year in Jacksonville. That's how close these two locations are, relatively speaking. So like they're staying on the road here, no sort of distractions. Like let's batten. So if you're painting the narrative that you painted, it's really kind of shapes nicely with like being on the road and sort of gathering together and all of that sort of thing. So this line opens pick'em on Sunday. And the Raiders, despite getting shut out that day, take the first money. Yeah. Right. And this is moving 1.5. There's some 2s out there, et cetera, et cetera. Now, obviously, up until you hit 3, 1, 1.5, 2, like it's not going to come, it's not going to jam you up too often here. I think the Raiders are a really good play here. I'm hoping Darren Waller is back. And once you get Darren Waller back, a week out of, being, down with the flu, Devontae Adams. I don't know what Josh Jacobs' deal was. Maybe the Saints all of a sudden, who had the best run defense in the league last year, and again, we talked about this, maybe they got it going last week from a run defense standpoint. Yeah. I don't think that's where the Jags are, right? Meanwhile, the Jags, come back from London. Jags have had the Raiders probably beat the Jags to Florida, right? Like they had a longer flight and all of that sort of thing, right? And they've both been there same sort of time. I think the Raiders, this is one of those games where everybody goes like, they got shut out last week and now they put up 30 points on the Jags. But you're right. Like the Jags are the better team. And the word you were looking for was metrics, right? Like that's where we know the Jags are better because they're 11th in yards per play on offense and they are 12th on yards per play on defense. Now that's not exactly lighting the world on fire here, but that's certainly better than their record. And the Raiders are, let's see if we can pull this up very quickly, basically dead even on offense. They're 12th on offense, but the Raiders defense is 24th defensively, right? Yeah. But like, what about the Jags have shown you that they can really take advantage of this, right? They finally realized that Travis Etienne is their best offensive weapon, but
took a while.
Yeah, the fact that it took a while, I think, is a pretty significant issue. I think this is a nice bounce back spot here. Like, it's funny. We go into the season and we go like, oh, can't pick on the Jags, can't pick on the Lions in Survivor, all these different sort of contests. Like, guess what? You totally could have, right? Yeah. You're right. Like you absolutely could have. They've combined for 3 wins, right? And they're all the same wins that they always have, right? The Jags always beat the Colts. Yeah. So anyway, I think this is a nice spot here for the Raiders. Obviously, rather than be at home here, but I think they're going to win this game and do so relatively comfortably. And this Jags team that lost at home to the Texans, so I'm not exactly afraid of home field advantage when it comes to the Jags.
I got you. Let's go with the Seahawks at the Cards, and the Cards are home favorites by 2 points here. And I look at this number, and my initial thought is that this number might have come down because people just bet on the Seahawks. Because my initial thought is, wait, why are the Cards favored here? I understand the merry-go-round of the NFC West that we talk about a lot here, but that's pre-Geno, right? Before right. Geno. And we know right now, watching the Seahawks with Geno Smith, I mean, who would have thought we'd be here in week 9 thinking that we have more faith in Geno Smith than Kyler Murray? It's an interesting place. It's a very interesting place. But here we go. I am on the Seahawks just because of what has gone on so far this season with the Seahawks and Geno Smith and even Pete Carroll, who a lot of people probably were thinking was kind of washed heading into this. Like his time was up, has everything passed him by. And yet he's got the Seahawks moving. He's got them rolling. Give me the Seahawks. I'm going to roll with them. But my question to you, is this a spot? A spot. We talk about these sometimes.
The old spot.
Where you're just catching the Seahawks in a bad spot. Where like they're not going to win every game. But when you look at the schedule, it's like, oh, yeah, this would be a game that they would lose.
Yeah, so let's talk about the line here, right? So on the surface, it looks a little lazy. It looks a little sort of like standard where the books just go, Seattle, Arizona, make it -3 at home, Arizona. Like, let's move on with our lives here, right? And that's what they did. Yeah. And then so everybody goes like, Seahawks, I love them. Like +3, give me a full field goal against this Card team that now everybody hates. And it's like, yeah, I'll take that. And you know who took it? This guy right here with this face that I'm pointing to. So I did that at +3. I didn't do it because like I love the Seahawks or I love the Seahawks in this game. I did it because like I want to get ahead of the move because my number in my ratings has this at about 2.5. So the number is fair in that standpoint. But with the, arguably important thing to remember here is, was it 2 weeks ago? Arizona goes to Seattle and are 2.5, 3-point road favorites in Seattle, which, again, like we see Arizona, they go on the road to Minnesota and they were only 3.5-point underdogs. Right. And by the way, like probably should have covered. So I don't think you make a massive adjustment necessarily on that. And then like as much as like thankfully Seattle covered against the Giants last week, it got a little dicey there. Like, I mean, part of that was like a weird, basically a weird entire game for Tyler Lockett where he's fumbling the ball in 3 and, trying to catch touchdown passes with his face mask, which didn't end up going particularly well. So, like, yeah, we love the Geno thing, and God knows, like, Kenneth Walker is fun as hell and all of that sort of thing. But, like, if they were 3-point underdogs at home 2 weeks ago, again, listen, I understand the result of the game. Arizona went in there and, like, bleeped the bleep. And, Seattle won that game, like, relatively comfortably. Like, again, it's just one game.
Yeah.
And that was without DeAndre Hopkins. And we know, obviously, the Cardinals' offense in general is better without DeAndre Hopkins and all that sort of thing. If you just take that game, like we do the, quick change, right? Where it's like, I think we're given 2.5 points for Seattle and home field advantage, like maybe 1 for the Cardinals. So we got a 3.5-point flip. Now we're talking about like a 6-point favorite here that the Cardinals, in theory, sort of would have been 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Without DeAndre Hopkins. So like, okay, let's add DeAndre Hopkins. Let's throw a point or his way and now we've got a 7-point favorite. Well, now we go, okay, but you know what? We do have to factor in the results from these last couple of weeks and yada, yada, yada. Can we get down from 7 points to 2? It's a pretty big jump, right? Like I know again, and it's super fun and like everybody and their dog's going to be on Seattle and it's going to be great. But doesn't it kind of feel a little like last week, but in a reverse way? Where the Giants were like, oh, but they beat the Jags last week. Like they're keeping it going. It's like, or like the team, or the Seahawks are probably the right side in that game. And again, the Seahawks were the right side. So I understand why they might be the right side here. So all of this is to say like, how much lower is this going to go? We're going to get Arizona -1 because it's already come off 3. So I'm sitting here with this. I readily admit I am sitting here with the Seahawks +3 ticket. Because of the market move, not because I'm sort of like buying all in on the Seahawks. And like, again, the Cardinals just won a game at home against New Orleans, who, whatever you want to sort of believe about the Raiders, like just shut out the Raiders. So like, again, like maybe they convert that 4th down. Maybe they don't muff that punt. Maybe they go down and they get a field goal. It's a very real possibility the Cardinals have won both of their games since DeAndre Hopkins comes back. And like, I hate to sort of like deploy this, but like everybody's going to be on the Seahawks, which again is why I made the bet at +3, right? And like, when does that ever go particularly well? Now, strangely enough, in the last few weeks, that has actually gone really, really well for people, like betting these sort of, trendy underdog, right? We had happened with the Seahawks against the Chargers 2 weeks ago. There was a game this past week where it happened again. I can't remember it offhand, but it's
the Giants before last week. The
Giants
before.
Yeah, I mean the Giants before. Yeah, exactly. Well, Giants against the Jags 2 weeks ago is absolutely one where everybody's like, how could the Jags be favored by 3? And it's like, okay, just take your free money, I guess. So like maybe this is free money on Seattle, or maybe I just sit on a +3 ticket and just kind of live my life. But like I think the more sort of, probably sharper, whatever you want to call it, bet is like wait for the Cardinals to be -1. If people are, because I think people are going to like the money line. I think you could get a relatively cheap money line on the favorite here on the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Like, again, this whole deal is about jumping on and off the trains, right?
Yeah.
Like, and they're going different directions, and like you're a total hobo, and you've got a stick with like a red and white checkered, handkerchief with all your possessions, and you're just hopping back and forth on these trains, man. And like, it might be time to hop off the Seahawks for at least this one game. Again, we'll see where this number goes, but you can't, these two teams can't be pick 'em in Arizona. Let's put it that way.
No. I totally got you. Totally understand where it's at. And this is a game where I'm making the pick. I'm on Geno and the Seahawks, knowing the spot that maybe I'm overstepping, but I'm okay with that because I feel like I built up the currency with Geno over the last few weeks, so I can ride with that. The team that I have not built up the currency with, though, is, either of these teams, really. Unless we're talking about betting against the Rams, because I had a lot of fun doing that, I'll say. Yeah. But we go to the Rams and the Bucs. The Bucs are 3-point home favorites here, and things are grim for both of these teams. But I feel like this has to be a get-right spot for Tampa Bay. I would hope. You're at home. The Rams just seem to struggle against anyone that has a decent defense, and I know that even though the Bucs are beat up on both sides of the ball a bit here, the Rams are just, things are not going well for the Rams here. They should just like chill and go home and watch the Super Bowl tapes from last year and enjoy that ride, because I don't know if things are going to get better for them. The Bucs, I'm still holding out some hope, and I don't like laying the 3 points, but because it's 3, not 3.5, I'll take the Bucs.
Okay, I got some stuff to say here.
That's fair.
Next time you think that some head coach, and I don't mean you obviously specifically, I mean everybody in the world, is some sort of like boy genius, like got it all figured out, like backing this guy into this, would follow this guy anywhere, blah, 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 blah. Think of Sean McVay leaving Cooper Kupp down 17 points with like 3 minutes to go of that game and running tunnel screens with him, where he's basically begging to get him lit up by a series of linebackers, if not defensive linemen. And tell me that Sean McVay, guru of whatever, like, throw money at him to be on TV to tell us how smart he is about everything. Just think about that move.
Yeah.
Who on the Rams do you have any regard, fear, or whatever for on offense other than Cooper Kupp? He is it. That's the list. Keep that guy healthy.
Yeah.
And so this whole thing comes down to like, is Cooper Kupp playing? And honestly, even if the answer is yes most weeks, the answer is still, nah, I'm good when it comes to the Rams. As we rode the Niners again for the 8th millionth time
and that
in a
was
row.
Probably the most emphatic of the wins.
Yeah.
That was just like, we're going to just play around here with our best Madden plays.
Yeah, and we talked about how it's the least value because they were actually road favorites, and of course they panned the crowd, and it's literally all red, and of course they end up trucking them, and the Rams ran their script, and it was just a series of screen passes because they knew they couldn't block the 49ers, and then when the 49ers turned to each other and said, hey, maybe we should watch out for the screen, that was that, right? Blouses. So
anytime Jimmy Garoppolo is carving up your team,
sure, without Debo. And it's Christian McCaffrey's out there just running a train, speaking of hobos, on the Rams. So fundamentally, we go, okay, if Cooper Kupp's not playing in this game, how many points do you want? Take them, right?
Yeah.
You are welcome to them. Take them and go. So we have to look at this line. We go, okay, what where was this line? Where is it going? All of that sort of thing, right? So this line opened -2.5 on the Bucs.
Okay.
I'm like, I just watched Cooper Kupp like almost need to be like carted off.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, maybe he's awesome again next week, but like, or he's like 80% and he's just kind of out there like running around. And if he's decoying, sure, but like, who's the other option that you know what I mean? That's going to take advantage of this decoy.
Yeah.
So I'm grabbing that -2.5. I'm like, but I also don't really love it because like I'm now backing the Buccaneers, which is not really the plan, right? And the Buccaneers, the market, odds makers tried to tell us this. Let's put it this way: they tried to tell us about the Buccaneers last week when they made them home underdogs on the open against the Ravens, right? You'll remember the Ravens opened like 2.5, and it was a massive adjustment from the on the look ahead point spread, which is an indicator of the rating for the Buccaneers changing, right? Yeah. And so they go from being rated essentially as a 70 out of 100 for the first 7 weeks of the season. They get knocked down to literally a mediocre team at 50 out of 100. But we refused to just sort of believe it. Part of it was Ravens had a bad injury report, and of course they end up starting all those guys, and like all those guys end up leaving halfway through the game. So like I don't really know what to make of all that. The point is, by the time the game starts, the Bucs are back to -2, -2.5, and they're back. They're not quite at 70, right? But they're sort of like down in the mid-60s when they were trying to tell us this team needs to be down in the 50s, right? So the market point spread using that rating of the mid-60s makes the Bucs 3.8, right? -3.8, right? So pretty close to 4. If we go, you know what? Odds makers, you were right the first time, and we apologize. We were right the first time, and they are a low, mid to low 50s type of a team here. And we go, you know what, Shaq Barrett's out and all of that kind of thing. And we go, okay, we're going to drop them down to like a 52, right? A very mediocre run-of-the-mill type of a football team. How does that change the point spread? Well, that moves them down to basically a pick 'em against this Rams team. But again, what if Cooper Kupp's not functional?
Yeah.
Where do the Rams go? And like we still haven't moved the Rams down to that same level, right? We're still kind of clinging to this existence of the Rams. And so now the odds makers are trying to tell us this week, the Rams aren't very good. You can't use your previous rating of the Rams that made them essentially level with the 49ers last week in a game that was essentially a neutral site. Right? They are trying to tell us, knock the Rams down in your ratings. And they're doing so while Cooper Kupp might miss the game or might be compromised for this game and might not make it through this game. Meanwhile, you do the whole like Bucs have extra time here. Like the division is such a just absolute mess that like they probably think they can still win. They're still odds on -175 favorites to win the division. The season is not over for the Bucs, even though they keep sort of taking these embarrassing high-profile losses. Yeah. And they have the extra time, and in theory, they're, at least offensively, they're getting a little bit healthier. Again, the defense is missing. You mentioned the Seahawks. One of the things that if there's a gambling god of any kind, the Seahawks lose to the Cardinals, and the Buccaneers hammer the Rams, and we got Seahawks at Buccaneers next week with what I've got as projected to be an 8-point Buccaneers favor.
Yeah.
Give me that on the Seattle Seahawks, right? Give me all of that. Like, that's where we want to be when it comes to the Seahawks and fading the Buccaneers, not with a sort of, mangle-legged, Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, dying to throw interceptions at any given moment, right? I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but like, this is Bucs, man. Again, like they don't have, this isn't Lamar Jackson and like all of the different things that the Ravens could do offensively to mess with Tampa. This is Matt Stafford and Van Jefferson, potentially.
We got the Chiefs in prime time yet again. They are 12.5-point favorites hosting the Tennessee Titans. I love the Chiefs. I blindly defend the Chiefs, lay the points with the Chiefs, but this one is different because I always pause on double-digit spreads. And I will say, hey, I can see the world in which Vrabel knows the playbook. I'm just going to run the ball, going to manage the clock, going to try to keep the possessions down for Mr. Mahomes and all that fun stuff. And they just muck up the game and ugly up the game. And we're not asking them to win. Just asking them to not lose by more than 12.5 points. So I need you to tell me again, my favorite question. Can you talk me into not taking the points with the double-digit spread or no?
I'm not going to do that. I think the important thing here is who's going to play quarterback for the Titans. Now, we didn't get a ton of Malik Willis in our lives last week.
But we got enough.
We might have gotten enough, certainly. 10 pass attempts for our guy, Malik Willis. Almost had, I think he had about half that many rushing attempts. And of course, Derrick Henry had like 1 trillion rushing attempts. It's certainly not going to be as easy as far as like just hand the ball off. We'll be okay here, right? Like that doesn't seem like that's going to be the way to play this game. And so the concern becomes: is it going to be Tennessee, a la the game against the Bills earlier this year, right? And that's like could be the case for Ryan Tannehill as well. So you go, okay, well, what's the line supposed to be here? My market number, again, point spreads that have led up to this point, has Kansas City about -10. A lot of that has to do with just a disrespect for the Titans. And that includes the number for the Malik Willis Titans last week, right? That number, the team being only 2-point favorites against the Houston Texans, right? We were bottoming them out in sort of the low 40s. Right. Which again should have been kind of our first trigger, like we should be betting the Titans here. Kansas City, like we got a pretty good rating for them, right? Like low 70s, like maybe we get to a point here we bump them up into the mid 70s, but like this is a team that was home underdogs by a full field goal to the Bills. Bills rating is, by the way, completely and utterly out of control. It is careening off of the tracks. Again, more train references. Don't know why we're doing that. My number, like I have, I have a little bit better for the Chiefs, but I kind of have a lot better for the Titans because like I have to kind of account for the fact that they just somehow like get it done or stay in games, like, right? Like it has nothing to do with the metrics because they're both offensively and defensively, they're in the bottom quarter of the league. Yeah. But like, again, I'm not even busting them up into like a above average team. I still have them at below average. But if the market put them at 41 last week and the number still isn't 12.5, right? Like my number is going to be a little bit better. So my number is 9, right? Okay. And so like that number, maybe that number needs to be validated by having Ryan Tannehill play and like be healthy, because that ends up being sort of a theoretical threat to actually throw the ball. I don't know. But like, obviously this line sort of suggests Malik Willis and, again, a 41 rating or even a high 30s rating. But if it's either of those, it's still too high at 12.5, right? Because I can't get to 12.5 without absolutely just murdering the Titans rating or putting the Chiefs at a rating that I'm not comfortable putting them high enough, because 3 weeks ago, they were 7-point favorites to the Raiders. Yeah. Like, are we positive the Raiders are 5.5 points better than the Titans on a neutral?
No, definitely not.
Right? Because like they were like 1.5. The Titans and Raiders have played already this season. It was a 1.5 point spread. You know what I mean? So like, okay, that was in Tennessee, and like maybe if that's a neutral, like if we throw 1.5, like maybe they're a 3-point difference. They're not 5.5 point difference. So like any way you sort of slice it here, this line should be around 10.5, and is 12.5. Now, how often is it going to land 11 or land 12 where you're going to actually get that value? Yeah. Probably not all that much, which is kind of the scary part here. But yeah, I think this is, if we can just sort of let the sports books take our money with the Bills and then like kind of just hope for the best when it comes to the Texans and the Titans here as massive underdogs, like to me, that's, I think, a pretty sensible split here from a value perspective, right? Because we didn't talk about the Jets being like, oh, this should be 10 and it's 12.5. We were like, no, it should be 12.5. Right? We're like, no, that's correct spread. Right?
Yeah,
like these ones aren't, right? They're just not, and that doesn't mean they're going to win or lose or whatever. No. They're just not correct.
Yeah, totally got you here. We wind out or wrap up in English. I don't know what we're doing stuff here.
I'll wrap out.
Bottom line, what I'm trying to say here, we got one more game left, and that would be the Monday Nighter. We got the Ravens, 2.5-point favorites in New Orleans. The Saints, I love me taking the Saints as home dogs here. But when you break down their team and what's going on, Andy Dalton here he's moving the ball. He's being Andy Dalton, being serviceable. And the benefit of that is that they still have Taysom Hill doing sprinkling him in here and there. And it's something that you pointed out earlier on in the season, that less Taysom Hill is actually more Taysom Hill, right? Because and when you combine them, it's like if you made them into one quarterback, that's a pretty good quarterback, right? Yeah. And with that said, and their defense and the home crowd on a Monday night in New Orleans, woo, give me the points. I'll take all the points here.
Yeah, and the market said give me all the points, but you know what? They got all the points when it was 3.5 on Sunday.
See, I don't that just
honestly, that's the correct reaction. That's the correct reaction because you know that 3.5 existed. That's a mega key number. The Ravens could absolutely win this game by 3 and probably do a really high percentage of the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But on the plus side, you see the market react, take the Saints, obviously in part because they want to get the 3. But the sports books and odds makers, etc., were well, we might have screwed up here, right? And they moved it through 3, right? There's other games here where there's heavy money on one side, and the sports book's nope, we think our number is correct. They're at least admitting that their number wasn't correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So they're going, okay, let's drop this down to 2.5. Right. And you're still yeah, I'm kind of actually interested in the Saints because maybe I'm out here just by myself with my little Saints fleur-de-lis hat or whatever. I don't know, how do they dress up? There's all sorts of weird Pope cloaky type situations happening.
Some Mardi Gras vibes. I don't know.
Let's go with the Mardi Gras vibe. I got my beads on, ready to just sling them around. I bet the Saints when they were 9-1 to win the division. Because people are going oh, is Carolina the team? Are they going to pull this off? Is the Falcons the team? They going to pull this off? And obviously price matters in all of these situations. And at one point, Carolina was 18-1 even just before that game. Now, they last week, and they go and they lose that game last week. And obviously a lot of the value kind of sucks out of that because they end up losing a division game. But I'm sitting there going the Saints are really close to being really good. Mm-hmm. And we saw that last week. You and I have been begging for the defense to do something, right? Stand up. And I'm again, I paint the picture however you want. A shutout against any professional football team is standing up and doing something. And so we're looking at a team that, it's weird to say, but is tied with Seattle for 5th in offense and be impressed by that, right? Detroit, Miami, Kansas City, and Buffalo are the only better yards per play offenses than the Saints. What? Yeah. Right? And if I was to tell, and they're also 9th in defense. And we didn't even really love the defense because it hasn't been necessarily all that great in the last few weeks, right? Last 3 games has actually been a lot worse than their sort of season-long thing. But the point is, because we've seen the personnel last year specifically, and to start this year, if you had told me halfway through the season, guess what? The Saints offense is going to be good and the defense is actually going to need improvement. Are you comfortable with that? I'd be yeah. I wouldn't want it the other way. I wouldn't want it to be yeah, the defense is really good, but we're not sure about the offense. I'm yeah, I wouldn't be sure about the offense either with Jameis Winston and or Andy Dalton. But if it's getting work done, then cool. Let's just keep this vibe up right now. And you mentioned Taysom Hill, we're Alvin Kamara, right? They finally figured that he is an option. And the point to that is, what if they had Alvin Kamara in London for that game against Minnesota with the double doink on the mega long, field goal, et cetera, et cetera? What if they have a win over the Vikings on a neutral on their resume? What if anybody tackles Jamar Chase? Or maybe they get an extra field goal along the way there where they don't lose that game, where they were they had a 9-point lead in the fourth quarter against the Bengals. it's very sort of coin flippy possible
Yeah.
that they beat the Vikings and the Bengals, two teams that are rated higher than them, who are sort of playoff conceptual teams here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that might be the Saints, right? Like, the Saints might have that, and instead of being 3-5, I think their record is, they might be 5-3. They might have a 2-game lead on the division. And I even got to the part where they were in a 0-0 scoreless game with the Bucs at home through whatever it was, like 3 quarters earlier on. I think it was week 3 in the season. What if they win that game, right? So like, they lose all these kind of really close games, and like, you kind of understand it because like the pieces are just kind of all over the place. Didn't even mention the fact that they had a 10 to 13 point lead at Arizona, and then like a deflected ball ended up in the hands of a Cardinal defender for a pick 6, and then that obviously snowballed from there. Like, they are in all of these games. So I might just be the only one here with my beads just going like, yeah, the Saints are decent. Like, I promise you, like, maybe the record's not going to be great at the end of the year, but it might not have to be. So now the number I think on the division is like 4-1, something along those lines. Honestly, I think I bet that, because I can tell you, I think the Saints are going to beat the Bucs when they go to Tampa, because like we've talked about this, they just play them close. Can they beat the Ravens here? You look at the Ravens and you go, okay, fast track, like indoors, like that seems kind of problematic. But like, okay, cool win last week, but I'm just still not like, what am I supposed to do with the Ravens rating here?
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, the market rating here was 3.5. So I understand why it opened 3.5. I think it's very interesting that the first move, and a big one, was towards the Saints. And because my rating, you talk about overrated, underrated, properly rated. Again, I think the Saints are underrated right now. And they've been being sort of priced, again, home underdogs to the Raiders. That's a low 40s type of a price here. If I just put them at 50, like dead nuts, even Steven, average team, at home against Baltimore, this game's a pick 'em. So, you know what I mean? Like, so there's still theoretical value at plus 2.5 here on the Saints, and maybe on the money line, because honestly, I think this game's a pick 'em game. And from that standpoint, like, again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the idiot with the beads over here, and Mardi Gras ended 3 months ago. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? But like, I'm riding it. I'm riding it. God knows Andy Dalton's going to be in prime time, and we're getting that whole situation. Like, God, that's going to be miserable. And honestly, like, hopefully, I shouldn't say hopefully, given that this is 2.5 and I've got 3.5 in my pocket, it's probably going to keep me off of them in the circa millions contest. And so I don't have to sit there all Monday waiting for this game to start, knowing that I'm going face to face here with Lamar Jackson. So I feel a little bit better about that. I'm happy with my plus 3.5, all that sort of thing. But I think it's just worth mentioning that I think the Saints are better than the market thinks. And there's indication that people are kind of coming around.
Totally fair, my dude. Totally fair. That will be an electric Monday nighter for sure. I just love when you get into those types of atmospheres in primetime games as well, too. And New Orleans is one of the best atmospheres in the entire NFL. So excited to see that game for sure. But between now and then, where can the people find you when they need to get the information and education that they so crave, my dude?
Absolutely. At MRUS Authentic on Twitter. Of course, you can follow at The Score. Everything over at The Score app. You've got the app already. Get your betting alerts. Get the betting alerts. That way you get our articles as soon as they become published, which means you can get the numbers. College football rolling right now. 8-4 last week. We are at 59.1%. We talked about your record when it comes to the NFL, right? You're at 61%, and people go like, oh, 61%, like that's okay, blah, blah, blah. Over volume, you're what, 25 games above 500? Like, think about that. 25 or so more bets won than lost. The longer we go, right, the more profitable it becomes. There it is, right there.
Just trying to keep it rolling.
27 games over 500, my guy is, right? Think about that for a second.
Just trying to keep the train moving. And as Matt mentioned, we try to keep this moving. The pod drops every Thursday. You can like and subscribe to follow along with us here as we continue to do that, and follow Matt, everything that he does online and especially at The Score. You can follow me on Twitter at Shell Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. Like, subscribe wherever you get the pod. We talked about YouTube, we talked about Twitch, SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple, all those fun places. We've got you covered, because I always like to say on these podcasts to close things out, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the On Blast Podcast, NFL Picks Edition, part of the On Blast Podcast Network. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.